Right, the two dots on the top of Memches Amud Aleph. So this is all going to be rayas about the machlekes we have brought on the bottom of Mem Zayin Amud Beis between Abaye and Rava about, it was specifically about the case of Oyer Beged Lamei, someone where they wove a beged for a mace. Abaye says it's also because Hazmana Melsi, and Rava says it's not also, he holds Hazmana La Melsi. Makes, yeah, that's the question. Does preparing something, saying I'm going to use this for a burial, does that make it aser? That halacha is that something that is used for burial is aser bana. That's, we learn out from a pasuk from I think from Egla Arufa. Is that what it is? Yeah. But the question is, does just saying you're going to do that, are you planning to use it? Does that make it aser? Look at my meisve. Kippah shehi tmeya midras. If you have a cloth that became tummy midras, there's a heightened level of tumah for a zav or who sits on something, who supports themselves on something. If the object that they sat on is something that's intended to be sat upon, meaning if they sit on if there happens to be, let's say, there's like a dreidel on the chair and you sit on it, you're not intended to sit on a dreidel. It doesn't become tummy midras, but a cushion becomes tummy midras or a chair. But if you have a cloth, it could either be used as a cushion or it could be used as a kerchief. And they used it as a cushion, and therefore became tummy midras, which is an avatuma. The nasno l'sefer. But then afterwards, they decided to take that piece of cloth and instead of using it as a cushion, they gave it to use it to wrap around the Sefer Torah. Once something is used to wrap around the Sefer Torah, it now becomes also to use for anything else, and it can't be a cushion anymore. Tar min midras, so it's no longer tar as a tumah midras. This higher level of tumah that can be metama other things, avol tumah mega midras, but it doesn't lose its tumah that it got while it was a tumah midras. I know this is confusing, but the point of the matter is. The point is that when it's a cushion, when it has designated as a cushion, so then it has a level of tumah that it can make something else tummy. But once that designation as a cushion goes away, so it no longer is a tumah midras. It's not something that supports something else, because it's not settled. It's not designated for that use. So now it just left with the actual tumah that came about because it itself was a tummy midras. So it's if it touched itself, which can make something else tummy. So it retains the lower level of tumah. But in any case, we see that we say nasnu l'sefer. You didn't wrap it around the Sefer Torah. It says you said I'm going to wrap it around the Sefer Torah. So you see, just designating it for that purpose takes it away from being a tumah midras. This is not like Abaya who says Hazmana Milsi. Why do you? I'm saying it's like Abaya, I'm sorry, that says Hazmana Milsi, that just being masminit for a Sefer Torah makes it no longer a midras. So the Gemara says no. When it says nasnu, it means that he had in mind that it should be designated, he was masminit for a Sefer Torah, and then he actually wrapped it around the Sefer Torah. In fact, the Gemara says if once he already wrapped it around the Sefer Torah, what does it have to say nasnu? Nisan nasai, that he intended it, which is a lashon of azmana. Once he already wrapped it, then what does he have to intend it also? Just the wrapping around should be enough to make it that it's no longer a cushion. That itself, that should be a hazman itself. So the Rav Chisda, a high sudra, the azmane lemeitze beit tefillin, what do you call it? A bag that you intended to use for tefillin as a tefillin zekel, b'tzar beit tefillin, and then he put in a tefillin, also lemeitze beit pshiti. It can no longer be used as a regular bag. You can't use it for divrei chayil. But if he just was mazmin, if he just designated, or if he just used it, just using it itself is not enough to designate it as a tefillin. That could be just bakroi. The way Rashi says is, sometimes just like if you take your tefillin and you're going somewhere and you just want to. For a minute, you want to protect it from the rain, you put your tefillin there. That doesn't make it a tefillin zekel that no longer be used for anything else.
So
it has to be hazmana, according to Rav Chizda, together with the use. Just the use itself is not enough. So that will be the explanation over here why it said nesanasai v'karkachtoi. Well, Abai Dama hazmana milsi. According to Abai, that says hazmana milsi. Why? How would he understand? Hazmana avagav the loy tzarbei tzarbei yasmini and loy yasmini loy. Abai would say no. Nesanasai doesn't have anything to do with karkachtoi. That case over there, it means just he had to, all he had to do was be mazmin it, because he will understand it, but pashtus. He will disagree with Rav Chizda. He would say that hazman itself would be enough. Toshma, nefesh shabanu l'shem chai, someone who built a mausoleum for someone who's alive, and he said, I want to start building it while he's alive, so he'll be ready for when he's dead. Mutter bahana. It's mutter bahana. It doesn't get the status of a kever, which, like we said, is asabana. Haisef by dimus echad l'shem base. But if he adds on one row of bricks for not someone who's alive, but for someone who's already dead, asabana. At that point, it becomes asabana. So l'chayra it's mashma. So it's mashma that only because he built a row of bricks. What is that? Hazmana milsi.
Hazmana milsi because
Dimas nidach shavanim aser al hazmana milsi, because it's not talking about where the mace is. We understand the mace is not inside of it, but because you're preparing it for the mace who's not there, that is enough. It's intended for the mace. No, we're talking about where the mace was inside. Then what do you have to build anything if the mace is in there? It's like anytime you put a mace in a kever, it asks the kever. We're talking about where the mace was only there for a short period of time. So then it becomes like the case we said with the tefillin, where it becomes a usage, an akroi type of usage, a temporary usage. So if you built a row of bricks while the mace is there, then that building becomes a hazmana. Then it's not akra. You're building something, you're doing something. It's as if you said, I want this to be a kever, because you're building it for the purpose of the mace. Rav Chizda, Papa says b'shem Rav Chizda, but you should just realize that if you recognize which was the row of bricks that was put there, it's still recognizable. If you take it out after, you take away the mace, and you take away that row of bricks, it will be mutter, which is a little hard to understand, because like we said, the way I just said it is that the building is the hazmana. So how does taking away the row of bricks take away the hazmana? So I guess it must be that just like the mace being there could be bakroi, the building the hazmana could also be bakroi. It wasn't intended. If you take it away, that means it's just like when you take away the mace, it takes away.
Your case, the mace in the back of the hearse, then it's not. That's not. It's a temporary situation.
Right. So the mace in the back of the hearse, we understand.
Which if you built an extra row, even though it was there not permanently, it was there. That row, because the mace was in there at that time, that's gonna get us into trouble. If you remove that row, you're good to go.
And so you're describing what the din is.
Yeah.
But the building of the bricks is not directly addressing the permanence of the mace.
Correct.
It's addressing the hazmana.
Right.
So how does the taking away? Yes. One would have thought that the hazmana is, once you make a hazmana, it's permanent. You can't retract your hazmana. But Vaishnava says yes, you could. The hazmana was not a complete
binding, right?
It wasn't the binding hazmana. It wasn't fully designated. Toshma chaytzav kever la'aviv, someone who dug or built a kever for his father. But then he went and he buried him in a different kever. You can't bury him there. He can't. The person who had built it cannot use that kever for himself. Can't say, okay, now my father we buried somewhere else, so this should be my kever. The chayra, it's because it was Musman. He had prepared it for a kever, and you can't be nana from it. So no, over there it's a different reason. Hatzim covered of it. That's a totally different thing. It has nothing to do with hazmana. It's because it was intended for his father. It's not covered for him to be buried there. Someone who cut stones, he made bricks to use for his father's mausoleum. And then he buried it somewhere else. He can't use those stones for himself. So for his father, if the reason is covered kibbud ava aim, then it makes sense. He can't use something that was intended for his father. Eliyam mishum hazmana. If you say it's al hazmana, a regular din of hazmana, since it was prepared for a kever, regardless of his father, that's why it's also tavi la riga mikal amanda ama. Would anyone say that if you spun thread to eventually that you intend to make into a cloth that you're going to then use as a shroud, tachrichem? No one would say it's usher. It has to be that you're doing it much more imminently for kvura. But something that's just a prep, that's not hazm. That's not being mazmin. It means if you wouldn't say if you fill up the car with gas to say you're going to be able to take the mace to the cemetery, that gas is now muzman lekvura. It's just a prep. It's just a hechsher to get you to that. So the same thing. He's making over here bricks to make a mausoleum. That wouldn't be included in hazmana. But I'll cover it up if something that was intended for his father, it's not proper for him to take advantage of, whether it's hechsher, no matter how attenuated it is. Toshma.
It's hard to, I'm saying, cutting stone and making thread, that you don't go back. But once the shroud was made, once the stones were carved up, then
and then you have hazmana, then
right.
That hazmana would apply to it.
We want raw material. It's hard to know exactly at what point we would say.
Yeah, right. It's still that's really the point. If it's raw material,
right,
it's not yet. You can't have hazmana on something.
Even according to Abaya, it's not nice.
It's not ripe. Toshma, kever chodosh mutter bahana. A brand new grave that was dug, and it's not intended for anyone in particular. It's mutter bahana because it's not. There's no mace. Hittel ba nefel. You put a nefel inside asa bahana. At that point, it becomes asa bahana. Hittel and light hittel light. It's mashma. It only becomes asa when you put the nefel inside. But if you just with masman, it's not. It's a kasha on abaya. So no, it could be even if he didn't place the nefel inside. But this is to be mapik to disagree with Reb Shimon Gamliel. The Amar ain't lenefelim tfisas a kever. He says if you put a nefel in a kever and then remove it, the nefel does not make it muzman. It doesn't make it permanently. Whenever you're mafanet, you could take it out. Whenever a nefel doesn't have the same level of hazmana as a person, and therefore a nefel does not make a kever.
A regular buried nefel doesn't have the same halachas as an adult, right? Or a child.
So the reason we said hit the nefel was just to tell you the din of nefel, not to tell you the din of hazmana. Kamashma. Toshma. Meiser hamesim lemesim. Money.
Is there a svar to that?
By nefel, yeah, I don't know what it is. I guess it's not a person, so it's not as much of a mace.
Tfisas kever doesn't have the halachas of okay.
Yeah, tfisas. Yeah, let's see Rashi. No, it's just in the Sechtes. It doesn't say. Behind the comment, hitel mishum the boy lashmin the nefel type that's kibroi laishay afagav shapinasa. Unlike Rav Shimon Gamliel, that's all that Rashi says. Tashma moisar hamesim lemesim. When you collected money to bury people, for you had a fund for chaver kadisha to do burials, and there's leftover money at the end of the year. It should be used for other mason. Moiser hames, if you had money for a specific mace, one person, you collect the money, and there was leftover money, liyarshav, it should go to the yarshim of that mace. They collected money, they heard someone died, and they needed money, it cost $500, they collected $1,000, the other $500 goes to his yarshim. So, if we're saying this l'chayr is shver, if you say hazmana milsahi, how could you say it goes liyarshav? It should be asa bahana. The money should be asa bahana. So the Taisus really asks, why is this any different than collecting like the stones, preparing the stones, the hechsherim. It's still a raw material. Money is also a raw material.
Right,
Yeah. So he says, you see the bottom of the Taisis. Mois adifi mitavi la'ariga mishum dechazul lemiknagu kol mili. Adarabba, money is very fungible. It could be used for anything. It represents everything possible. It's not a raw material. It's the opposite of a raw material. It's easily convertible into whatever you want it to be. Yeah.
I'm sure it's so
Right. Commodities versus
right. That's really
derivatives and yeah. Hachamayaskinan. Anyway, the question is, how could it? That's the Gemara's kasha. According to Abaya, it should be hazmana. Hachamayaskinan should govern mechaim. No, we're talking about where they collected money before the person even died. In fact, how could you say it's talking about where you collect the money while he was alive, and that's why there's no hazmana? The Tanan doesn't seem to be the Brisa says not like that. Tanan Moisa Mesim Lemesim Moisa Mesli Yarshav. But Tani Allah, we said about this mission that we just quoted, Ketzad Gavul Lemesim Stam. If you were going for Mesim Stam Azazel Moisa Mesim Lemesim, whatever's left goes to the Mesim. Gavul Lemezeh Zel Moisa Mesli Yarshav. If you were going, if you collected for a specific mace, that's where it goes to Yarshim. So it says Gavul Lemesim. Gavul mace. Yeah, mace is not chayim, right? Well, tameich Gemara. Okay, so you want to say that it says Gavul mace, so therefore it's talking about mesim, and it's not like Abai, because we say it's no hazman mil. So tameich em sefer mei oimer leyigba en ashiyava yalio. Rameh says you can't. Rameh disagrees with what we just said about individual that it goes to Yarshim. He says no, you have to leave it because he, as we're going to see, he's not sure about what the halacha is with it. Reb Nassan says the other way around. Yasa dimis al kivroi zilif leim mitasai. Should either use the money to improve the kever, to make pictures on the kever, or they used to spread wine on the kever to make it smell good. So you have to use it for the actual. You'll find some way to use it on this mace, even though it's extra. You could find extra things to spend it on. So he holds taka that it goes for the mace. So this is l'chayra like Abaya. Al Abaya metaretz tamei v'Rav metaretz tamei. Both of them. The Reb Nosson, we had said from the beginning of the brisa, it says gavul mace. So why did it say liyarshav? How could it be liyarshav? It's a mace according to Abaya hazmana milsehi. So how could you give it to his yarshim? It has to go to the mace.
Right.
So we said, okay, you have a good point. But in the end, Rav Nosson is like Abaya, because he says you do have to give it to the mace.
Right.
So the brisa itself seems to be either like part of it is like Abaya and part of it is like Rava. So we don't really want to have Abaya and Rava being chaylik and a machlokes tanoim.
Yeah.
So now we're going to say that it's not machlokes. Each one will have a way to explain the two shittas according to themselves. So Abaya metatz tamei v'Rav metatz tamei. Abaya metatz tamei the kuli alma hazman milsi. They'll say everyone holds hazman milsi. Why do we say it goes to Yarshav? Tanakama sava the chazilei tafis. The chazilei tafis. We're talking about over here what's extra, right? They collected $1,000, so $500 there's hazmana on. The other $1,000 there was no hazmana on the part that's extra. So this is not, it's inapplicable hazmana melsi. Rameh misafkalei tafasi lei tafis. Rameh is misupik about that. Reb Nosson would say, no, even the extra part is typhus, and since according to Abai Hazman and Milsi, it's going to be awesome. Everyone holds Hazman Milsi. Now the real issue according to Rava is going to be, how do we understand Reb Nosson? Reb Nosson was the one who said that you have to use whatever was collected for the mace. Why would that be necessary according to Rava that says Hazman Alav Milsi?
So another road, some extra money to take on even fancier spritzing water.
Yeah.
Like what?
Why can't you give it to the Yarshim? So Tanakama Sava ki bazule achule machale zilus agabe Yarshim. This case is really, it's not really the Tanakama, it's Rav Nosson, but the point is the Tanakama would hold that one might say that a person who has money collected for him is mevuzah, and therefore he doesn't, even though Hazman Allah Milsahi, he doesn't want that his Yarshim should benefit. That's like really a design for him. That money that's collected for him, now his kids are benefiting from it. You could have said you would not want such a thing, right? You don't want them to collect for you altogether. But if you collect, you shouldn't be making a party that they made money of it.
Worst case scenario.
Right. So the Tanakama says that the mace is Michael, and he says, okay, it could go to the Yarshim. He says they're not Michael. This is even though Hasman Allah Milsi, he does not want his Yarshim to get anything. He says in this particular case, it's almost as if Hasman is Milsi. I don't want anyone to be using that money. Tanakama holds the people are Michael. He holds it. It's not such a shaklat. He doesn't care. He says, I'm dead. I don't care what happens with the money after I'm dead. Toshma. By Kalim. If the father, it's talking about a child, Nebuch was nifter, and the parents are distraught, and they're just saying, we're gonna throw everything we own into the kever. We don't want anything from this world. They're throwing all their belongings into the kever with him. Mitzvah alacher matzilan. It's a mitzvah for others to go take those kalim that they threw in. They threw in their rings. They threw in everything they own. Their watches. You take it out because the Rashi says zashavas aveda. They're under the grip of a mishagas. But the problem is once they threw it into the kever, it's Hasmana Milsi. It became part of the Kvura. It should be also.
Just touch the kever, right? Because inside the
touching, what did we
not
touch?
a problem, right?
Touching is not. Well, we'll see the touching, but the point is Hasman.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, no, Hasa Mishumarayu. That's not a Hasmana. Hasmana that came because of temporary insanity is not real Hasmana, and that's why they could get them out. In fact, what does it mean if it's because of we're saying because it touched the meat, then it becomes us. And like Rashi says, what does it make a difference whether it touched the meat? What is that? How does that affect the seriousness of the Hasmana? It's a totally different cheshbon. It's because once it touches. It's a yutaka right that it depends on touching it, but for a different thing that not al tuma, not some kind of tuma thing, and not hasmana, but it's because tuma is not a problem, so it's tummy. Right. But we're talking about that people will, if they throw kalim into the kever, people will think it's like tachricha emes that were then afterwards taken out of the kever. And tachricha emes certainly are also bahana. So people would mix it up once they threw it into the kever and it touched the mace. Touch the mita, the actual mita that he was being buried in, they'll think they took tachrichim out of the kever.
Why are tachrichim different than stams or touching? Well, why is that?
No. The point is tachrichim are also right. They're also bahana. So once this person threw stuff in and it was actually in the kever, it looks like you're taking out tachrichim. They'll mix it up. They'll think it was the tachrichim. They'll think it was actual tachrichim that they took out. Toshma kisha solaniach by tefillin. Toshma kisha solaniach by tefillin. Kiss that was made a tefillin zekel. Also niach by mice. Can't use it for money. Niach by tefillin. Once you put in a tefillin, yaniach by mice. If it was something that wasn't in, you didn't designate it for tefillin, but you put one time tefillin into it. Yaniach by mice. That's not usher to be used, which is very similar to what we saw before. Ema, so Balachayra, we said if you intended Shasol and Niach B'Tfilin is also he has manamel. See, Ema Asol v'hi Niach B'Tfilin. He made it. He intended it for Tfilin, and then he put Tfilin in. Also Niach B'Tfilin Mois. Because Rav Chizda, like Rav Chizda said before, right? Rav Chizda said before that actually using it is going to make it also. Toshma Amalon Omen. Aseli tikshel sefer not tikshel tefillin. He told someone, make me a mantle for a sefer Torah or a bag for tefillin. Actually, nishtamish behen kodesh until you actually use it for kodesh mutal nishtamish behen chayil. You can use it for other things. There's also l'chayra. So l'chayra, this seems to say that hazmana milsi. You're right. You have shown that there's hazmana milsi, but I'll show you that there's a mandam who says that it's not the hazmana is not milsi. The Tanya tzipan zav. If someone covered his tefillin with gold, the actual tefillin, not the bag. You made the bottom out of a behemoth tmeya psulas. It's possible, right? You have to make it out of our behemoth kosher. Our behemoth tyrek shares. Even though it was not made lishma. So Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer, af our behemoth tyrek psulas achi avdu lishma. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says until Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says you have to do it lishma. So we're going to say, the Gemara is saying it's a fascinating thing. The Gemara is saying that this question of whether you need lishma in building tefillin is going to be the same machlokes of whether hazmana milsi or not. That we always thought we all thought you have to make tefillin lishma. It's like you have to have the Haibana ideas. You have to be thinking about you want to be tefillin. We're saying it's hazmana. It has to be prepared. You have to be miyachaded as tefillin. That's what the kavana is. So the Manda Amu says you don't need kavana holds like Rava that has mana lav milsi. It's not necessary to be mazmin. The Manda Amu says you do. He says you do have to have in mind Ibn Lishman holds has mana milsi, and this will be a machlekes tanaim about this machlekes abaya. Amalei Ravina Rav Mika the Ramu by Mace argue about beged the Mace. We're asked like a zayta good question on the original question of Abaya and Rava. They talked about where you wove begadim to bury someone in. Whoever weaves a beged for someone who's dying, it's like a very time consuming. Amalei Inka going shikli darpanya. They're places that are very poor, and that's what they have to do. Darsh Meir Mehilsa Kavasa Dabaya, Rabba Nam Mehilsa Kavasa the Rava, Mehilsa Kavasa the Rava. And the halacha is like Rava. Okay, Shkayach. Thank you. Oh, there's we got to the end of